10 spot today we have Dorothea Puente. You know the saying, don't judge a book by its cover? Well, this certainly is a case of that. If you took a glance at Dorothea and knew nothing about her, you'd probably assume she was someone's kind grandma who always had some cookies and a glass of milk waiting, but that could not be any further from the actual truth. She was actually a serial killer, and she decided to prey upon some of the most vulnerable people in our communities, people who were seeking help and assistance. Dorothea operated a large rooming house that was set in a large Victorian home in Sacramento, California. The residents who would often stay there were people who struggled with different substances such as alcohol, people who had been in mental hospitals, and the elderly. All of these people were receiving social security checks, and if they suddenly vanished, she figured no one would ask. In 1982, they did begin to vanish, but of course their social security checks were continually being cashed. Obviously, as it turns out, Dorothea was taking their lives and then their money. She has now been called the landlady from hell. In our number 9 spot today we have Arn Johnson. This one is a little different because this person did not claim to be from hell, but rather that they had hell inside of them when they committed their atrocious crime. The trial was well known previously, but it has become even more widely spread as it was the trial that the newest Conjuring movie was based off of. In 1981, Arn Cheyenne Johnson killed 40-year-old Alan Bono, and what appeared to have just been a simple argument gone wrong quickly got a lot more convoluted and confusing. When it came to his defense for the crime, the devil made him do it. This was the first time that demonic possession had been used in an American courtroom as a defense. Arn had been at the scene of about 3 exorcisms that had occurred prior to his alleged possession, and this is why there really were some people who believed his story. At the end of the day, the jury in the trial decided to convict him of manslaughter. In our number 8 spot today we have H.H. Holmes. I've definitely talked about this guy before in other videos because he is considered America's first serial killer, and he was especially gruesome. H.H. went to medical school, and shortly after finishing he began killing people in order to steal their property. He built himself a huge, horrifying home that he had built to include things like secret passages and trapped doors. There were soundproof rooms, there were doors that only locked from the outside, and then they had gas jets on the inside of the room, and he even had a kiln to cremate the bodies. Not only would he get close to women so that he could take control of their finances and then kill them, but he would also require his employees to take out life insurance policies that named him as the beneficiary. It isn't exactly known how many victims he had, but it's thought to be somewhere over 200. He was sentenced to death when he was finally caught, and it is said that before his execution he famously said, quote, "I was born with the very devil in me." I think that might just be something that me and HH can agree on. In our number 7 spot today we have Verkisto. This story is quite a bit different than the others on this list today for some obvious reasons. This story isn't coming from someone who has done a bunch of evil things, but instead coming from someone named Verkisto who says that they've met Satan upwards of 100 times and who is trying their best to stay as far away from him as possible. Verkisto described some extremely horrific things that they said they witnessed Satan do, and even said that they've experienced possession, influence, and oppression, all while battling Satan and his followers. They said that he would manifest himself and appear visible to even the naked eye, and apparently this was all so that he could check on the status of Verkisto's torment and demise. So far it seems that Verkisto has been able to steer clear of the whole demise thing, but this still sounds like a far from pleasant life. This story was posted on the internet in June of 2020, so hopefully by now maybe things are looking better for Verkisto. In our number 6 spot today we have Sam Little. Sam Little is well known for being one of the worst serial killers ever. He has confessed to taking the lives of more than 90 people, and while authorities have only been able to definitively connect him to 30, they say they have no reason to doubt the validity of any of his other confessions. Sam was able to continue on his horrible path for so many years because of the fact that he committed these crimes in different states and different counties, which made it way harder for them to be able to connect his crimes to each other. In an interview with an investigator named Sergeant LeBlanc, as they discussed religious beliefs, they spoke about the nature of sin. Sam stated he had no fear of God and said that God made him this way, so why should he ask for forgiveness? He said that God knew everything that he did. He also allegedly told a few select people that he believed that he was the devil. In our number 5 spot today, we have Luis Garavito. Luis gained a nickname from the media of the Beast, and I think that's a great indication of the nature of his atrocious crimes. He is said to be one of the worst serial killers in the entire world, and it is believed that his victim count is up in the 300s range, which is absolutely shocking. He confessed to 147 crimes, and he was found guilty on 139 of those counts, which put his sentence at 1,853 years. But here's the thing. This trial took place in Colombia, where he lives, and apparently there is a law which puts the maximum sentence at 30 years. He was sentenced in 1999, meaning there's only a few years of his sentence left, and apparently there's a chance he could get out early for good behavior. According to Luis himself, he committed these crimes because he had made a deal with the devil, and he explained that satanic ritual was involved in all of his crimes. In our number 4 spot today, we have Richard Ramirez. Richard, who is also known as the Night Stalker, was a serial killer who terrorized the streets of Los Angeles in the 1980s. He was known for his MO of invading homes, which left him initially being dubbed as the walk-in killer, but he had another signature that was concerning to many people, especially during the height of the satanic panic. Richard was known for leaving behind different satanic messages at the scene of his crimes. Because of his satanic signature, after he left his first pentagram at the scene of a crime, authorities became worried that he was a Charles Manson copycat, but instead he was just his own kind of monster. It is said that he would leave more pentagrams behind while also telling his victims to swear to Satan instead of God. During his court appearances, he would hold up a pentagram, and after pleading not guilty, he said, quote, "Hail Satan." In our number 3 spot today, we have Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey is one of the most well-known serial killers, with his crimes taking place from 1978 to 1991. His crimes are much too brutal and horrifying to detail on this channel, but he is known for taking the lives of 17 different people. At his trial, not only did he plead not guilty, but his attorney had some interesting words for the court. His attorney stated that his bloody pattern had caused him to believe that he was the devil, which was intended to bolster his insanity plea. His attorney said, quote, "He became enamored, overwhelmed, caught up in the character in the horror movie Exorcist 3. The character was Satan because he was the personification of evil." Not only was Jeffrey found to be sane and ended up being sentenced to multiple life sentences in prison, but not too long after his sentence started, he was killed by a fellow inmate. In our number 2 spot today, we have David Berkowitz. Also famously known as the Son of Sam, David is a killer who didn't necessarily claim to be from hell, but placed his crimes on a demon who had taken the shape of the dog that belonged to his neighbors. I know, I don't believe it either. Obviously. He led authorities on one of the largest manhunts ever seen in New York, as he left little notes behind trying to be arrogant, thinking he was invincible. Well, clearly he wasn't, as he was caught and convicted. He later admitted to making up the dog story, which, duh. But he did say that instead he was a member of a violent satanic cult, and his crimes were committed as a part of that. In our number 1 spot today, we have Ronald DeFeo. If you've seen Amityville Horror, in some ways you'll be familiar with this case, although the movie adds a strong paranormal aspect that most likely wasn't present in reality. Ronald was charged and convicted of taking the lives of his entire family, and earlier this year he passed away in jail at the age of 69. After his passing, certain letters that he had written were released. Before his death, Ronald had given many different accounts of what happened on that terrible night, which has made it impossible for anyone to really know for sure. While the entire case has become infamous, with many people believing that the crimes could be attributed to some kind of paranormal force, even Ronald himself stated, quote, "There was no demon. You know who the demon is. I am the demon."
Starting off this countdown, we have Jennifer Perez. This is a pretty famous case of a young Christian girl who was sent to hell and then back. So Jennifer was raised in a very Christian household. As she grew older, she found herself falling out of her faith, and she started doing drugs. In fact, in the early 2000s, she actually overdosed, died, and then was sent to hell. This is how she described it. Apparently, she was first sent to heaven. She found herself standing ashamed in front of God. He then told her that she failed to show the fruit of her faith, and she was sent to hell. She remembers falling while feeling her surroundings become hotter and hotter. Then an intense smell of sulfur filled her lungs. She heard screams of agony and saw people being tortured. Fortunately though, Jennifer was brought back to life and given a second chance. Now she wants to correct her wrongdoing, so when she does pass again, she will spend her life in heaven. Moving on to number 9, we have the Apocalypse of Peter. Around the late 2nd century, the book The Apocalypse of Peter appeared, and it described a terrifying vision one had of hell. According to the narrator, sinners are hung by their tongues over bubbling pools of gore. Blasphemers are tortured by getting red-hot iron stabbed into their eyes. Also, clouds of worms trail over the landscape, devouring everything in their path. And extreme sinners are thrown off of cliffs or get their eyes burnt out. Well then, that got extremely dark extremely fast. Moving on to number 8, we have Bill Weiss. In November of 1998, a devout Christian man, Bill Weiss, was sent down to hell for 23 minutes. He later detailed his experience in his book, 23 Minutes in Hell. On that day, he found himself falling down a long tunnel before finding himself in a dark, dirty prison. The prison was extremely hot. In fact, he thought he was going to die from how hot it was. Not only that, but 2 large creatures were sharing the cell with him. Bill also talked about the constant screaming, foul odors, raging pits of fire, torment, and intense darkness. After the 23 minutes, he saw a bright light and was lifted out of the tunnel and back to Earth. He now wants to share his experience with the world. Moving on to number 7, we have Saint Faustina's visions. Mary Faustina was a Polish nun during the early 20th century who apparently had a number of visions about hell. According to her, and I quote, "Hell is a gigantic, smoky chamber filled with a suffocating, indescribable stench and eternal darkness. Demons tiptoe from pit to pit, unleashing special tortures tailor-made for each new soul, while God himself burns sinners with his own agonizing fire." She continued on saying that a majority of souls in hell are non-believers. Those who sinned actually end up in purgatory instead, I guess for a chance to fix your ways before then going to heaven. Moving on to number 6, we have the vision of Anne Catherine Emmerich. Anne Catherine was an 18th century mystic. Sadly, she was constantly tortured with horrifying visions. The worst was the vision she received of hell. According to Anne, hell is a dirty, rundown city. Buildings are collapsed, there's tons of swamps where sinners are, and vipers and reptiles slither between buildings, attacking and eating lost souls. On top of all that, demons wander around and Lucifer is chained up, constantly howling in agony. Not only that, she said that she saw a number of prophecies on the walls of hell, which said that Satan was going to be released onto Earth before the year 2000. So could it be that he's currently wandering around Earth, taking souls back with him to hell? Maybe. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Sister Josefa Menendez. Sister Josefa Menendez was a Spanish nun in the early 20th century. Sadly, she was only a nun for 4 years before passing away in the convent at 33. Now, while living there, she received a number of terrifying visions of hell. This scared her immensely because she was a loyal follower of God. She was so nervous that she didn't want to write down the description of hell that she saw. Alas, she managed to do so. According to her, hell is filled with long, dark corridors and eternally burning fires. Not only that, but any soul condemned to hell loses the power to feel love or happiness or any positive emotions. All they feel is cruelty and misery. In a heartbreaking passage, she wrote about a soul that said they would give anything just to be able to feel love again. That is so freaking sad. So it's not even like you forget what all the happy feelings feel like. No, you remember it and you long for it daily. In our 4th spot, we have the vision of Tundale. During the Middle Ages, an Irish man by the name Tundale had a 2-day trip to hell. According to him, in hell, people are cooked to be made into a soup. There are gigantic frying pans in which people are cooked in. Not only that, but demons with their little pitchforks push people off of mountains. Others chop people up into little bits and then magically put them back together again, only to chop them up again. And this is a perpetual cycle, so it's endless torture. And apparently, Tundale himself was tortured while down there. The most terrifying thing that he reported was Acheron. Acheron is a gigantic beast that can swallow 9,000 men at a time. Once you're inside of his body, you're then eaten by other things that are inside of his body, like snakes and rats, all while being burned and suffocated with sulfur. How pleasant does that sound? Coming in at number 3, we have the curse. Have you ever told someone, go to hell? Well, if you have, then you just cursed yourself. According to a number of religious texts, if you curse someone, you are actually cursing yourself in return. Here's a text. If you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you are in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you are in danger of the fires of hell. Matthew 5:22. So the curse is like a boomerang. In the end, you'll be in hell and suffering more than the person that you tried to curse. Moral of the story, don't curse people. Coming in at number 2, we have Groundhog Day. According to Matthew 25:46, those who have decided to reject God and his commandments will go away into eternal punishment, while the righteous will be led into eternal life. In hell, you will be constantly tortured and tormented. According to some religious texts, in hell you will be chained and forced to relive your bad choices on earth day after day. You'll be constantly surrounded by your sins, reliving their moments over and over again. Not only that, others will be able to see your sins as well. Literally, this will drive you to insanity, and no matter what you do, you can't escape it, so it's eternal. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Emanuel Swedenborg. In the mid-18th century, scientist and philosopher Emanuel Swedenborg claimed that there was more than one heaven and more than one hell. He said that there were 3 versions of heaven, all pretty much the same versions of themselves, whereas the hells were insanely different. In one hell, the sinners are trapped in a big, decaying city filled with violence. Demons and lost souls live together, but they spend their days fighting each other. In another hell, it's a burning city with every building being a brothel, where people are forced to engage in certain activities with each other, and not just like normal stuff, no, like things involving excrement, if you get what I'm saying. Another hell is a dark forest filled with beasts and endless deserts and dark, dirty caves. So, which hell would you rather spend the rest of your life in? Let me know in the comments below.
Coming in at number 10, Robert Johnson. One of the most famous situations of someone selling their soul to the devil. It would seem that he kind of got a raw deal, because even though this dude became one of the best jazz players of all time, he died at 27. Dude, if I'm selling my soul to the devil, you better believe that I'm going to want to live a full life. Like, you get my soul for eternity after I die. The least you can do is let me enjoy the deal until I'm in my 90s, and I want to be a good 90. Like, I want to be able to run around like I'm Jack LaLanne. But rumor has it that Johnson was horrible at the guitar before he made his deal with the devil. Back then, when he played music, it was so bad that cats would scream and people would throw stuff at him. Then he left for a while, went to the mysterious crossroads, and came back a god of the guitar. He might have just found a teacher who was willing to show him how to use the tools that he was given that unlock his God-given powers to play the axe like a legend. Or maybe he did go down the easy road and got the devil to hook him up with some unholy powers to juice the whole thing up a little bit. Either way, if I was him, I would have played into the rumor, because it would have made you more popular. Everyone would want to come see the man who sold his soul to the devil to play like a god. They would want to know what the devil could give you. Coming in at number 9, we have Giuseppe Tartini. This is really how you reach legendary status. Just like Robert Johnson, you want to be a person so good at your craft that the only way people can justify it is by saying that you made a deal with the devil, that you are so unreal at ripping down what you do that you must have done some dirty work to get that good. That's what I want for my life. I want people to be like, this dude was for sure on some performance enhancers, or he was using black magic, because there's no way that anyone could be that good at what this guy did. That's what happened with Giuseppe. This dude was ripping through the violin so good that people were like, the devil must have hooked him up with some good juice. People thought that he could have had 6 fingers on one hand that allowed him to play notes that no one else could ever play. The story goes that Giuseppe woke up and the devil was sitting on the edge of his bed just ripping the violin. Like, the dude was so legendary at the violin that Giuseppe was awestruck. Then the devil just vanished. Giuseppe quickly wrote down everything he could remember from the song, and that became the Devil's Trill Sonata. It blew people away and everyone was breaking down to that song. It was so sick. But Giuseppe said the song that the devil played was even more legendary and was super lit. Those were his exact words. Coming in at number 8, we have Christian Bale, one of the greatest actors of our generation. How does he do it? Well, it must be the devil. I'm starting to see a pattern here. It seems like back in the day, people used to say the best people must have sold their soul to the devil in order to become great, because how else could they do it? Nowadays, if you become rich and famous, you are part of the Illuminati, which worships the devil. I mean, it's the only logical answer, right? It's not like people just work really hard and then they are able to achieve things that no other person ever could. There's no way that these speculations could be coming from people who haven't achieved anything of substance. Looking up at the people above them, them and then creating insane dialogue so they can cope with their inadequacies. No, that could never be the case, but in the case of Christian Bale, he did actually thank the devil in one of his Golden Globe speeches, which is pretty sus. I mean, he was probably just trying to stir the pot because he knows that people will freak out if he says something like that, or maybe the dude does believe in the devil. I don't know. Alright, coming in the next spot, we have Johann Faust. Unlike the other people on this list so far, this dude is a legendary bad guy. Faust was a teacher, professor, and one of the smartest people of his generation. He was alive in the 1500s, and back then he had one goal and one goal only. That was to become the smartest man alive. He wanted people to bow down to him and his genius, and he wanted the recognition that he believed he deserved. Because of this, he had an ego the size of Jupiter and thought that everyone was beneath him. He would beat his students, and he was known for being rude to everyone around him. Now, I don't know if it's because this guy was so mean or if it's because he was really into magic, but people thought that he was working with the devil. I guess if you're mean and you like magic, there would be nothing stopping you from getting into the dark arts. People even thought that this guy's dog was a demon, that it walked around, a demonic dog, and tried to attack people, and when no one was looking, it would morph into a human that would serve Faust. Eventually, the dude died, and it was the spectacular fashion in which this dude died which solidified him as someone who worked with the devil. His lab exploded, and the dude died in a ball of flames. The rumor says that there was a pair of hoof prints burned into the floorboards. Coming number 6, we have Niccolo Paganini. Man, back in the day, if you could rip the violin that good, people thought you must have been up to some funny business. There is no way you could get that good just off of skill and hard work, no way at all. Niccolo Paganini was very young when he picked up the violin. At only age 11, he would touch the instrument for the first time, and right away it would seem that he was destined to be one of the best in the world. When he was still a teenager, he was performing in front of hundreds of people. This guy was definitely a prodigy, but as we have learned, the theme of this list is that people can't trust you if you start to get too good. So there was talk that this dude sold his soul to the devil. People said that he would perform rituals to make himself more powerful, and that he even used dark magic to infuse a soul into his violin so it would sound even more beautiful. People say they saw the devil come out of him and stand next to him when he played. The kicker to this was that he didn't want to be blessed before he died. This was something that was very common back in the day. People wanted a priest to give them some sort of magic so they could go up and hang out with God, but Paganini denied this. Maybe because he knew he was going to hell and it was going to be way cooler and way more fun than going to heaven. Coming in number 5, we have Jimmy Page, once again hitting you with a legendary musician. It would be no surprise that the lead guitarist of Led Zeppelin, one of the greatest rock bands in the world, has suspicions circling around him that he made a deal with the devil. I mean, when rock and roll was coming up, everyone was saying that it was the devil's music. Well, then the devil has great taste, that's all I'm saying. But there's a little more juice to this than Republicans in the 70s being afraid that music was going to bring the end of the world. The thing is, Jimmy was actually a huge fan of the occult and apparently was very open about following the teachings to try and get better at guitar. Hey man, if you're trying to make it to the top, there isn't really anything wrong you can do as long as you're not hurting anyone. Cast a spell from a book to make those fingers move as fast as you can so you're always on the cutting edge of music. And all this came together when apparently you could hear the devil speak when you played Stairway to Heaven backwards. Yeah, I don't think that is true, but people love to think that the devil is hiding in rock and roll. Coming in number 4, we have Snoop Dogg. Yeah, Snoop D-O-double-G. This dude is a legend. Could you imagine? You're so much of a legend that you became one of the best rappers of all time. You started popping into movies. You changed your name to Snoop Lion for a bit. You become a commentator for a Mike Tyson fight, and you become best friends with Martha Stewart after she goes to jail. This dude has lived a life that would put most people to shame. Now, how has he been able to be so legendary? Was it skill? Was it luck? Was it coming up with his own language that people would actually learn to speak? Well, no, it was of course a deal with the devil, guys. Apparently in a song, Snoop talks about a voice coming into him and telling him to make a deal, and if he took the deal, he would live eternal and forever. Not a bad deal if you ask me. Coming in number 3, we have Urbain Grandier. It should be no surprise that the church has some weird things going on inside its walls. I mean, we know that it's full of creeps today that are doing horrible things, so someone who worships the devil is kind of small potatoes compared to the other things that are going on. Now, Urbain was ahead of his time when it came to being a horrible person in the church. He was apparently summoning the devil all the time and had magical powers. He would put curses on people he didn't like, and there was even a contract found that was said to be signed by the devil, and it was used against him in court. Could you imagine today, someone finds a fake contract and then they use it against you to put you in prison? Lol, that is great. Coming in number 2, we have Antonio Rose. This case of selling your soul to the devil was so famous that it impacted the culture of witches forever. So Rose was living back in the 1400s, and she wasn't doing well. She was trying to take care of her kid, but her husband had left, so she had to do whatever she could to try and keep this kid alive. Apparently the stress of just trying to stay alive started to wear on her, and she started to indulge in psychedelic drugs that you could rub on your skin. She was seen rubbing it on a broom handle and then riding it like you see witches do in popular culture today. Eventually people started to make claims that she was a witch and working with the devil when she attacked someone who came close to her home. She was arrested and convicted of being a witch and selling her soul to the devil. And coming at the number 1 spot, we have John Moulton. Now this one takes the number 1 spot just because it's funny. Apparently John Moulton was ready to sell his soul to the devil, but he had a plan. See, if you look through the history of the devil, he isn't the hardest dude to outsmart. John made a deal with the Prince of Darkness that he would sell his soul. The devil came and filled his boots with gold. The devil was like, heck yes, but then the devil came to do his job and he found that Moulton had put his boots at the top of a chimney and cut out the bottoms. Basically, if the devil wanted to fill the boots with gold, he would have had to fill the whole chimney. And the devil hates being tricked, so he burned his house down. Basically, it's the same thing when traders on Wall Street bets learn how to make money off of the stock market, and then Robin Hood stopped them from trading because the devil can never lose.
Starting off this countdown, we have Blue Ash, Ohio. According to an urban legend, there's a portal to hell in Blue Ash, Ohio. It's been given the name Satan's Hollow, and it's the place where a group of Satanists like to meet and conduct rituals there. Satan's Hollow is located in the woods near a storm drain. A number of residents have reported hearing screams from that tunnel at night. Maybe it's from the people being sacrificed there for Satan himself. So yeah, this group allegedly opened a portal to hell and go there whenever they can to make contact with Satan and perform satanic rituals for him. In our 9th spot, we have the Gates of Hell crater. Located in the Karakum Desert in Turkmenistan, there is this 230-foot wide hole that has been on fire for over 50 years. In fact, its glow can be seen from miles away. So the crater was actually created in 1971 when the Soviets were drilling in the area, but their drilling rig accidentally hit a massive underground natural gas cavern. This caused the ground to collapse, forming a huge crater and sinkhole. Now, here's the mystery. They don't know how the crater ignited in the first place, but it's been burning for nearly 50 years, even after people have tried to put the fire out. So it's thought that this area leads directly to hell. I mean, it's a fiery sinkhole. What if it just sucks you down and then brings you right to hell? Moving on to number 8, we have Helm. And I mean, the name itself literally has hell in it. Coincidence? I think not. Anyways, Helm is a small town near York, Pennsylvania, and legend goes that this location is home to one of the real 7 gates of hell. So according to the folklore, there is an abandoned insane asylum located on the outskirts of this town. In the 19th century, there was a fire at the asylum which killed some inmates and let the most dangerous inmates escape. Some were caught and then tortured or even killed. Others were trapped inside a series of gates, which they still haunt to this day. One of these gates is said to lead to hell. Over the years, this story has changed, but it's still believed that one of the gates is there in that town. In our 7th spot, we have Stull, Kansas. The small town of Stull in Kansas is another place said to have a gate to hell. First off, the town is rumored to be cursed. Apparently, it's been haunted by a number of demonic forces since the 1970s. Rumor has it that this is because the gate to hell is somewhere in that area. They think it's either in Stull Cemetery or by the United Methodist Church. Stull Cemetery, though, is said to be where people would go to practice occult rituals and contact Satan. In 1974, a newspaper wrote an article claiming that the devil was spotted twice in Stull that year. Once on Halloween and once on the spring equinox. That's why people started to believe that someone located and opened a gate to hell in the area, and now Satan has a way to get into our world. In fact, the town has to have 24-hour security because people like to jump the fence of that cemetery and explore the property looking for this gate or portal. In our 6th spot, we have the opening of the gate ritual. So apparently there's a ritual that you can perform in order to open a gate to hell. You know, in case it's ever been on your bucket list. According to occultist Astenu Sever, he performed this ritual in the past with some other occultists. He performed it on some historical grounds in the Balkans. He won't tell us the exact location though. And also, he said that they all took an oath so that they can't share what happened on that day. But he alludes to the fact that the ritual did work, and he even wrote a full article on how you can open a portal to hell yourself. Do I recommend you listen to him and try it? No, definitely not. He even shared a huge warning outlining all the risks of doing so. So let's just say it won't be pretty. But now there's a gate to hell somewhere out in Europe, and we don't really know where. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the family home portal. In 2008, Steph Harper, her husband Colin, and their 3 kids moved into a new home in North Wales. But as they started to settle in, they noticed something was off about their home. Shortly after moving in, they heard these weird banging noises and saw shadowy apparitions and stuff. You know, the typical paranormal stuff. But the biggest thing that her and her family noticed was that their house would smell of rotten flesh. Don't know how she knows what rotten flesh smells like, but that's besides the point. Smelling something rotten can be an indicator that your home is being haunted. After investigating, Steph believes that there is a portal to the spirit world in her lounge area in her house. She believes it was created before her house was built in the 1950s or 60s. But that's why her house has such a strong connection to the paranormal. Moving on to number 4, we have the Emerald Hill Hell House, otherwise known as the Demon House. This Pennsylvania house gets its name because of how haunted it is. Now, not much is known about it. It belongs to the McHugh family estate. The new owners of the house learned that the land that the mansion was built on was once a burial ground. So I mean, that right there is a bad sign. But wait, it gets worse. Sometime in the late 1860s, a woman named Carla arrived at the house. The house was given to her by her uncle who lived in Scotland. Sometime while living there, she decided to excavate some of the property. But while doing so, she found well over 70 unmarked graves. It said that when she unearthed these graves, she unleashed the evil on the land and opened a portal to hell. That's why the area is a hotbed for paranormal activity. Moving on to number 3, we have the portal opening incident. So apparently there's something called a portal opening ritual game, where you can use a mirror to open a door to the spirit world. I don't know about you, but that does not sound like a game at all. Anyways, a guy named AJ decided, hey, let's try this out. Why not? What on earth could possibly go wrong? So he was visiting his grandma's farmhouse and was like, this is the perfect location. So he grabbed the supplies he needed, including a full-length mirror. He followed the ritual, but he was goofing around with it all and he didn't think it would actually work. Well, while goofing off, he accidentally broke the mirror. He never got to properly close the portal, and now that the mirror is broken, he can't close it at all. Ever since then, the spirits followed him home and his place is haunted. So what did we learn today, folks? Don't play this portal game, don't fool around with spiritual games, and lastly, don't buy cheap mirrors. In our second spot, we have the ocean on fire. Earlier this year, a fire started in an underwater pipeline in the middle of the ocean. The ocean was then literally on fire, which seems hella impossible, but it happened anyways. So the fire was caused by a gas leak from an underwater pipeline in the Gulf of Mexico. People began sharing images of the ocean on fire and were like, oh my god, it's a portal to hell. Not gonna lie, it really does look like one. I don't know about you, but I didn't have Portal to Hell on my 2021 bingo card. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Crescent Hotel. The Crescent Hotel is referred to as the most haunted hotel in America. According to the legend, in 1937, Norman G. Baker, a millionaire inventor, turned a hotel into a hospital and posed as a doctor. He claimed that he had a cure for cancer. As a result, he began to treat patients despite having no proper training. This dude made up a weird mixture of alcohol, glycerin, carbolic acid, and he mixed it with tea from watermelon seeds and brown corn silk and clover leaves, and then he would give it to his patients, saying that this was the cure. As a result, many of the people he treated ended up dying. Over the years, many guests at this hotel have reported seeing ghosts and would experience paranormal activity. Then in 1997, the hotel's new owners decided to bring in a medium. The medium discovered that there is actually a portal to the spiritual world inside this hotel. Apparently it's located on top of what used to be the morgue. The medium said that, and I quote, "The dimension holds spirits of the dead. So, it sounds like hell to me.
Starting off this list at number 10, we have the author of the novel A Day in Hell. In this book, Matthew Botsford explains that after he accidentally walked into the middle of a shootout, he got shot in the head and died. He was resuscitated, but he was in a coma for 27 days afterwards. He explains a short time in hell as utter darkness that enveloped him as he was in thick black ink that poured over his eyes. He claimed that he was suspended in darkness, being blasted with hot air and having demonic eyes make their way towards him until some sort of divine entity grabbed him, telling him it wasn't his time.
Coming in number 9 is Army Dr. George Ritchie. He explains that in the 9 minutes he was dead, he was given a tour of hell by Jesus himself. I mean, what is Jesus doing in hell? Or maybe this isn't Jesus, maybe this is Jesus. Maybe this is Jesus in hell. Well, all around him he claims spirits were fighting each other to the death, kicking, biting, scratching, abuse, every single horrible act that could be imagined was taking place around him. And next up at number 8 is one aunt who died for a short time on the operating table. Well, she described the situation saying that she was lifted through the ceiling and into the sky. She ended up floating a few inches above a dirty brown, lifeless field, and across a dark void, she could see a lush green meadow. She suddenly felt something grabbing at her as if it was ripping flesh from her leg. She started withering to get out of the creature's grasp and saw her body on the operating table flailing around just before she was resurrected.
In at number 7, we have a professor who visited hell while he was unconscious prior to an emergency surgery. He says that during this time, he was being attacked by all sorts of vicious creatures, and when he tried to pray to protect himself, they only got angrier. He said that they screamed at him and that there was no God. He says that they spoke in the most obscene language, the worst blasphemy he has ever heard in his life. Coming in at the number 6 slot today, we got a hospice patient who came close to death. One of his workers said that his patient had a near-death experience one day and was terrified by what he saw. He says he saw what he thought was pain and fire, leading him to what he thinks was hell. Apparently, this man had no closure in his life and wasn't in touch with his family, so maybe this was a little bit of a wake-up call for him.
Halfway through, at number 5 is a Reddit user who has a very interesting interpretation of Satan.
This user claimed that he had OD'd 20 years ago. He died and saw Satan.
But what he saw wasn't what we normally envision, the devil as being, but rather he was a giant fire ant walking on lava.
Even he was confused why Satan would present himself as a fire ant, but I guess demons are gonna do what demons are gonna do.
Okay, if I'm the devil and I'm coming back as an animal, I am not coming back as one of the smallest animals ever.
I don't know, an ant that's on fire and it like crawls up your leg and gets in your shorts and stuff, maybe it goes in your urethra? That's bad.
Whoa, you took it to the next level.
I mean, that's hell. We're in hell, dude.
I'd come back as a dinosaur.
Yeah, a dinosaur would be
just a massive dinosaur, not the ones that eats only plants.
No. You want a what? The carnivorous?
A meat eater.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what you want.
I can't remember grade 3 science. Is that what it is? Carnivorous? The meat eater.
You have carnivores, herbivores, and omnivores. Boom.
Taking number 4 slot, we have somebody who explains hell as just like Earth, but dead. What does this mean? She says that after being hit by a car, she woke up in the same place where she was hit, except the sky was reddish orange, there was no animals, and the plants were dying or they were already dead. Is this real life right now? And the world smelled like rotten meat. Okay, so technically this one was a story on the non-sleep subreddit, but in my opinion, I feel like it seems like a pretty realistic version of what hell could be.
In at number 3 is a man who was momentarily killed in a bar fight. After being stabbed with a broken bottle, this man said that entering hell felt like passing through the open mouth of a volcano or burning lake. People who he knew had died were warning him not to come there, as there was no escape. All he could do was hear their crying and wailing of the souls that were trapped down there. After he came back to life, he decided to become a pastor to save the souls from going where he was headed.
Next up, number 2 is somebody who managed to crawl away from hell. I mean, I didn't know you can go to hell and come back. I thought it was a one-way ticket. Well, after suffering heart failure, he felt himself falling through Earth and landing just before a tall set of rusty gates, which had an aurora of being the gates of hell. Being too afraid to enter and knowing it wasn't his time, well, he managed to crawl back towards sunlight and back to life. Absolutely insane. I'm not sure if I believe it, but if it's a true story, remarkable.
And we're finishing off today's list with a Reddit user who drowned at 14.
This person claims that at the time they didn't entirely realize that they were dead.
They just felt like they were floating on the water. They said they saw somebody standing on the water who answered no when the user asked if they were God.
They told the user to keep floating, so they did. Eventually though, the cool water began heating up until it was boiling. They were paralyzed and forced to be in excruciating pain for what felt like years until the water cooled down again, only to start the process all over again.
Eventually the creature who the user spoke to earlier stopped and says, "Looks like someone's come for you, our playtime is over."
But maybe we will see each other again sometime. The user was then brought back to life by paramedics, the real life heroes.
Gorgia at number 10. 28-year-old Linda died during a brief illness and went to hell where she saw her parents burning in fire. Great. They weren't the only familiar faces she saw either. She also saw Colonel Gaddafi and Whitney Houston. She said that she was allowed to leave hell for a second chance at life, but was told that Muslims and Catholics would end up here if they didn't convert to Christianity, which doesn't really make any sense. Linda's story made her a celebrity in Sierra Leone, where two people stabbed one another over whether or not they thought her near-death experience was true. Sure. Coming into number 9, we have a World War II soldier's version of hell. In 1943, George Ritchie woke from his hospital bed where he had medically died of pneumonia. This is when Jesus showed up and gave him a guided tour of the afterlife. He showed him that hell was, surprisingly, a bar. Lost souls grasped at drinks being swilled back by the living, but they couldn't have them. He then saw other corners of hell as perpetual brawls and aggressive, brutal sex. Blimey. Apparently he was awoken by a Holy Spirit who told him that he had 45 years to publish his testimony. It's a generous deadline if ever I heard of one. Coming into number 8, we have Robert Light. Robert Light uploaded a video to YouTube claiming that God had showed him heaven and hell in a dream. Watched 33,000 times, he describes the horrors of hell to the internet. He said, "What I saw was a dark place, a place of weeping, a place of gnashing of teeth, a place of regret, a place of pain, and a pleasant mourning." He said there were a group of people who were there crying in anguish, saying, "Oh, why didn't anyone warn us that living life after our own desires would end up here?" I'm not really sure what kind of feedback he was getting because he disabled the comments for the video. I'm thinking people didn't really like it. Coming into number 7, we have Redditor Zashiba. This contributor to Redditor says that her aunt relayed a horrifying near-death experience to her. She medically died during an operation and floated above the operating table. Absolute classic near-death experience stuff right there. However, instead of floating towards the bright light, she floated above what Zashiba called a very large chasm. Now this chasm was in the middle of a very bland field of dirt. The hole was deep and dark and she couldn't see to the bottom. Her aunt then relayed seeing a beautiful field of green grass but out of her reach. She then began being pulled down into the chasm. Now her niece says that a pair of hands reached out in the blackness and started pulling at her, ripping her flesh from her legs and her feet. Her aunt then said that she saw herself in hospital again and she was revived. Ugh. Coming into number 6, we have the account of Angie Fenimore. Angie has been very forthcoming with her story, sharing it with a number of national news outlets and using the experience to make real changes in her life. Angie attempted suicide in 1991 when she was 27 years old. She says that as she was slipping away, she was subjected to a life review. Again, absolutely classic near-death stuff. After her life review, she was surrounded by a cold darkness that seemed to go on forever. She was then in some kind of dark open field surrounded by roaming lost souls. These were too sad to communicate with one another. Luckily, she came through it and in the end she wrote a book on her experience. She later became a life coach. I guess it goes to show, guys, you can be really low, but you can turn your life around. Hell is a burning cauldron according to Dr. Rajiv Party at number 5. Even doctors can go to hell, it seems. Dr. Party was the chief anesthetist at Bakersfield Heart Hospital in California. Unfortunately, he himself needed life-saving surgery from septic shock. During his surgery, he said he floated out of his body and felt a jolt of pure fear. He said that he heard screams of pain and anguish as he looked into a flaming canyon filled with burning flesh. He said a voice voice spoke to him, telling him he had lived a materialistic and selfish life and that he had lost all empathy. He was then given a second chance by angels who told him that he was destined to be a healer. He was then given his second chance and he turned everything around. I don't like this. Matthew Botsford describes flesh-eating demons at number 4. Great. Matthew was attending a business convention in Atlanta in 2013 when he was shot with an Uzi submachine gun. Matthew was involved in a random attack as an angry man sprayed shots onto the pavement. He described the pain of the bullet as like a needle in the head. However, that is nothing compared with what was to come next. Matthew said, "Immediately I shifted from the temporal realm I lived in to the eternal realm of hell." Aged just 28 at the time, Matthew spent 27 days in an induced coma. During this time, he was shackled over a glowing red abyss. He said there were four-legged creatures roaming in agony and screams of lost souls pierced the air. The red abyss rose to become visible magma, which burned his limbs off one by one, although they kept on growing back and then being burned off again. Ugh. He also said demons with sharp teeth ripped into his flesh. Luckily, what he describes as the hand of God brought him back. From that day, he has a renewed belief in God. Now sadly, Matthew's friend and business associate wasn't so lucky. He died on the spot right there on the pavement. Let's hope he didn't go to hell. From flesh eating to flesh tearing. Great! We are talking about Howard Storm's experience at number 3. In 1985, Howard was professor of art at Northern Kentucky University. Like a lot of people, he used anger as a coping mechanism and never really thought about trying to better himself. On the evening of June 1st, Howard very nearly died aged 38 as a result of a perforation of the stomach. He slipped into unconsciousness and saw figures beckoning him into a haze. He followed them and they pretended to be kind to him. They then urged him to stay with them. Now eventually the figures got very aggressive, verbally and physically. The shadowy figures taunted him and eventually began to claw and bite him. The whole situation culminated in him being eaten alive. Luckily, Howard awoke and felt a renewed love of Jesus. Coming into number 2, we have Vasula Ryden. Vasula believes that both God and the devil speak to her and use her as some kind of vessel. Good. Now it first happened in 1985, which seems to be an important year for big hell reveals. She said that she was writing a grocery list when an angel came and embodied her. This angel then showed her visions of both heaven and hell. Now she says that sometimes the devil possesses her and uses her hands to write. She also claimed that the devil showed her visions of the destruction of the World Trade Centers in 2001 and it looked a lot like hell. Are there any more celebrities in hell? You betcha! Our number 1 saw a few shocking hell residents that you might recognize. That's right, coming into number 1 we have Angelica Elizabeth Zambrano Mora. Yes, that is her full name, but let's just go with Angelica for short. Angelica was 18 when she died for 23 hours. She said that Jesus showed her hell where she saw people on fire begging for mercy. Who else did she run into? Firstly, Michael Jackson. Why was he there? Well, apparently he replicated demons in his dance moves. Jesus alleged that he had actually made a deal with the devil for fame and fortune. Who else was there? Well, none other than Pope John Paul II. Why? Jesus said that he liked money more than the truth, which, I mean, maybe that is the truth. It seems that Angelica thinks that Jesus took her there to tell the world that hell is real, but who knows? So guys, that was the